So, yeah, I was just going to talk for about 10 minutes. My first question is anybody here vegan? If you're vegan, just raise your hand. Oh, good. The reason I say good is because I have a lot of vegan friends, and I like talking to vegans, but I think it's much more interesting to talk to people who are not vegan. Because when I talk to vegans, we just sort of agree with each other. And it's because when I was, up until the time I was 19 years old, I was a militant meat eater. And I had nothing but disdain for vegetarians and vegans. There was a woman in my high school class, and she refused to play softball because the mitt was made out of leather. And I just thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. And I ate McDonald's, I ate Burger King, and my mom occasionally, because she was sort of like a dilettante spiritual person, and she would occasionally buy tofu and not know what to do with it. So it would like sit in the fridge like this strange foreign totem, and like I'd open the fridge and I'd look at it and be like, oh, please don't try and sneak it into something. And because she'd make chocolate chip cookies with like a little bit of tofu. And then when I was 19, I had this, for me, what was a very clear realization, which was when I was 10, I had been walking by my town dump, and I heard mewing coming from a little box. And I walked by the box, and I opened it up, and inside the box were 5 dead kittens and 1 barely alive kitten still with its eyes closed. And so I took this kitten, and I called up my mom, and we brought it to the vet, and the vet said, this cat is not going to live. Like, it's too young, it's too sick, it's separated from its mother. He's like, the best you can do is like keep it alive for a day or 2 and it will die. He's like, don't get attached to it. So we named it Tucker, and we brought it home, and my grandmother's dachshund named George became this cat's mother and nursed it back to health. And Tucker went on to live to 21 years old. So when I was 19, I was playing with Tucker, and all of a sudden, something like the gears lined up, and I thought, you know, I would do anything in my power to keep Tucker from suffering. Like, I love this little cat, and like, if someone tried to hurt him, I would lay down my life to protect this cat. And suddenly there was like this mental arithmetic. I was like, well, if you feel that way about this cat, how about other cats? And I was like, yeah, I like other cats. I would want them not to suffer. And then what about other mammals? And all of a sudden it dawned on me that I couldn't be a meat eater anymore, because I just simply couldn't be involved or condone a process that created suffering. And so that was a long time ago. That was like 25 years ago. And the trajectory of my veganism, for about a good 10 or 12 years, I maintained that I was the world's most militant, intolerant, annoying vegan. At one point, I considered not talking to other people if they weren't vegan. I wouldn't eat food that had been prepared in pots that had ever touched animal products. Like, I was awful. And I would yell at people who wore fur, and I would yell at people who ate meat. And then suddenly I realized, like, my intolerance and my militancy said nothing about this issue of veganism. It said everything about me and my own insecurities. So I realized that if I wanted people to respect my beliefs, in turn I have to respect their beliefs. So I'm still a vegan, and I still work as hard as I can on the cause of animal rights, but I do so hopefully with respect for people who disagree with me. Because I think if we can communicate with people who disagree with us in a respectful way, it increases the chances that we'll get through to them, and it increases the chances that we might actually learn from them. Like, for me, I had years where I was very presumptuous, and I wanted meat eaters to listen to me. And I didn't want to hear anything they had to say. You know, if they grew up in Argentina on the Pampas and they associate meat eating with their family, I didn't want to hear that. I was just like, you're still evil because you eat meat. And so now, I just put out a book recently called Gristle, and it's great because I didn't actually write any of it, but I can take credit for it. I rounded up all these experts in varying areas of animal production and looked at the ways in which factory farming and agribusiness hurt communities, hurt workers, hurt children, hurt the environment, and hurt the animals. And so we collected these essays and put them out not with the goal of being didactic and not with the goal of converting people to the cause of veganism, but simply presenting people with the facts behind factory farming. And that's, at present, that's sort of what I see my job in the world of animal rights as being. Not convincing people, but just respectfully presenting facts to them. And what was really interesting is doing the book tour for Gristle, how many facts about animal production people just aren't aware of. The biggest one that people were surprised by is, and I'm sure most people here know this, but the role of animal production in climate change, which is that animal production, according to the United Nations, is responsible for 25% of all climate change, which is more than every car, bus, truck, boat, plane on the planet. It's the #1 cause of deforestation in the rainforest. It's the #1 cause of water pollution in the United States. It decimates communities. It destroys people's health. I mean, it's hard for, I don't want to sound didactic, but in presenting these facts, some of the facts are so extreme that they do come across as didactic. But I do feel like the facts are out there, and I think it becomes incumbent upon us, if we're going to live reasonably self-aware lives, is to become aware of the consequences of our actions. And the people who who own the factory farms do everything in their power to make sure we don't know what goes on there. They put the factory farms as far away from consumers as possible. And they've done an amazing job of making sure that the people who eat animal products have no idea what the consequences are and how these products are produced and how they're going to affect them. And also, before I go to taking your questions, because I'm really interested to hear what questions you might have, I have a lot of friends who are what I could call sentimental vegans, and I think that's great. For me, I think, relatively aware that life ends with death, and I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with dying. So when animals die, that doesn't really bother me, because death is unavoidable. What bothers me is unnecessary suffering, because suffering is avoidable. And I think it's, to use a big word, I think it's almost a sin that we electively and voluntarily inflict unspeakable suffering on thousands of billions of animals, because it's unnecessary and ends up poisoning us, poisoning the environment, and causing all this suffering in the process. And it was that suffering and my unwillingness to be involved in it that has led me to be a vegan and led me, I guess, to sitting here today. So